My name's Chris, and welcome back to part 2 of a lesson on my favorite chord voicings in the key of C. I will be looking specifically today at the 2 minor, 3 minor, and 6 minor chords in the key of C on this chart here. I will have a PDF of the chord diagrams in the description I hope you check out. Also, I would watch part 1 of this series where I go over 1, 4, and 5, C, F, and G. This is not about music theory per se. This is more about giving beginner and intermediate guitarists some helpful tools on how to play these chords, how to make them sound great, how to recognize these chord voicings and songs you're trying to learn, or if you're trying to write tunes, or if you're just feeling uninspired and bored by the guitar. I think this is an important element here of guitar playing where we learn how to be qualitative, right? We learn how to have options. If we don't learn those things, we're usually going to fall out of love with the instrument. And moreover, I think we're missing the larger point of music, which is kind of an invitation to lean into the quality, to have a set of a color palette, if you will, right? And this makes us better artists. Okay, so I'm just going to jump in here, follow along with the PDF. And the first chord I want to start with actually is the 6th chord today. So I usually start from the beginning. Just a reminder, these are color coded for a certain reason. I'm about to talk about that more in a follow-up video. These are the different functions of the chords. Music theory is never, going to be anything more than a speculative, prescriptive way or descriptive way of talking about music, not prescriptive. So think about these as being paired. So like 1 and 6 go together a lot. Meaning, or actually they don't go together, they do, but they can be substituted for one another. So if you have a song where it's C, F, and G a lot, if you're a songwriter, right? So many songs use those 3 chords together. We could swap one of those 1 chords for an A minor, right? So I could go 1, 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, and I get a similar vibe because those chords are extremely common. They have 2 notes in common. They just really smoothly work together. The melody is usually going to work on both chords, the same melody. So that being said, we'll talk more about that in the future, about these kind of pairs. In fact, if you zoom out a little bit outside of the key of C, you'll realize that those are all relative to one another in like a 1 to 6 kind of relationship, meaning C and A minor obviously work like that. D minor and F, the 4 chord, also work like that, right? In the key of F, F is 1, D is 6. And in the key of G, G is 1, E is 6. So that's really why that works together. It's kind of cool. So that's neither here nor there. This is more about how we play these chords, but that's a really cool thing to see, and I usually don't see this taught that much. This kind of the function of the chord, and to think of these chords as related. And I think it's super helpful for our ear especially. So on the A minor chord, the typical A minor chord is beautiful. I play it a lot. Typically you'll find a lot of these, my more preferred voicings that I often teach students, the ones that often you also hear, I hear myself play them and I hear them in songs, tends to be like the 7 version of a chord. Not so much dominant 7, which is like a G7, but more over like the major and minor 7. So when I've got, like all these have a 7 at some point. Well, maybe not E minor, but a lot of these have the 7 involved, and in the previous videos in the series. And that kind of just softens the chord. And it also kind of makes these more similar, meaning A minor 7 is A, C, E, G. Now that doesn't matter for this video if you just want to learn some better sounding chords. But A, C, E, G, right? So the 3, 5, and 7 of that are C, E, G. This is where piano comes into play, right? Especially for guitar players, just to know that. C, E, G is just a C chord. So when you invoke the 7 in a minor or major 7 chord, you're getting like the other chord, like straight ahead, right? You're totally including the 1 chord in the 6 chord, or totally including like a D minor 7, D, F, A, C. There's an F chord in there, right? So that's kind of why those really sound nice, and our ear, I think, prefers that often in a modern context. That being said, A minor is a great sounding chord. Of course, you can just play 5 strings. If you've never like thought about chords like this at all, I recommend messing fingerpick and see what the sound is when we exclude a string, right? What does our ear want to hear on the top of that chord? My favorite probably out of this list, I should put a star next to this, but I don't have my marker, is A minor 7. I tell this for students a lot. It's just a C chord, standard C chord. Again, C and A minor are very similar, right? Right? So there we go, it's just that. So C without the ring finger. And therefore it's just open, 2, open, 1, open. Nothing on thickest. You can mute it if you can. I talked about this previously. I use my thumb over the guitar a lot to mute. That way I just don't have to think about it over here. Find a way to consistently mute. The more you're paying attention when you're playing to this kind of thing, the less musically available you can be. But during practice, we have all the attention in the world we can pay to it, right? So that's one of the big difference between practice and playing that it took me 20 plus years to figure out. But I'll talk more about it in the future as well. So A minor 7's great. So this can really go beautifully to all these other chords, and there's a lot of open resonance. We get an open G string. Why not have an open string in the chord if it sounds good, right? It's gonna be more resonant. That's my favorite A minor 7, or A minor, however. A minor 7 plus pinky, this next option. This is following what we did with C in the previous video. So we can just include this pinky here. That's a really good kind of intuition to have. If, let's say you're in the key of D, which I'll do in the future on this series. I might look at adding stuff from that D chord to other chords in the key, especially the 6th chord, especially the cousin, right? The 1 and 6 kind of thing. That's a really good idea, and actually you can really take that to the extreme and add stuff from the 1 chord to any of the other chords, no matter if it's related or not, because the 1 chord's in charge, right? That's something that once you zoom out a lot and you realize that these all have flavors, right? Like this has a certain sound. And when I hear a song in this key of C, meaning C no capo, or maybe a capoed up the guitar with the same shapes, I'm really feeling this key. I'm feeling, oh yeah, that sounds like C. There's all this movement that's kind of really particular. People who like fingerpick a lot really know this, because there's a lot more, my sciencey brain likes terms like locality or something, right? There's a lot of like really pretty, there's a lot of context, right? We all know this sound of A minor. You know, if you play guitar, you probably recognize this, or E minor, or a power chord, right? There's all this context to chords. So, and especially keys. Okay, so A minor 7 plus pinky, getting back to this. So this we can do in the key of, you know, C as well, or on a C chord. So that's really nice. We have that 5th on top. There's this song by this guy named Donovan Woods, I think, Portland, Maine. It's kind of a singer-songwriter, but he does this up the guitar a little bit, and it's so beautiful. He takes this, so 6, 5, 4, 1, and he makes it the pinky the focal point of that whole progression. So something like that. Right, and it just gives it such a I don't know, a heart, right? Something about that. Again, if that's not the style, if you need, you know, that's great. Or, you know, using whatever voicings you like, subconsciously that serve the song. But many people don't learn this stuff for a long time, and beginners benefit from knowing it, because this is the kind of magic, right? Like when I first started playing guitar, it's pretty much self-directed. I had piano background, but I was 12 or so, or maybe 13, I forget. But I just remember like disappearing into my bedroom and like listening to songs and starting to hear, this sounds like that. Like hearing, oh, this is cool, they're not doing this. It might have been like, oh, they're playing this chord, but it was more like, they're doing like, I'm learning some of the pro secrets. Like, oh, I don't have to go D all the time, I can go this. oh, I can leave one of the strings open and that sounds cool, right? That's a free sound, if you will. So we're always looking out for these kind of freebie things and the kind of real world ways people play, because that's often why we fall in love with music, right? So I really dig this one with that on top, and you can include that in all the chords, right? We looked at that last time on the G and the F chord. You could just throw it in there as well. Okay, so finally we have A minor plus movement. So this is not just one chord, but I would just have you look around in this A minor chord for stuff you can do. There's a lot of stuff here. As you play guitar, you learn not only different chord voicings, but also movements on different chords. And in every genre of music, that takes on a different meaning, right? That's the stuff the pros know as well, is they know how to move on a chord, meaning they know how to play extra notes, they know how to embellish, right? So I could hammer on this open in the middle, the G string, so go from A minor 7 to A minor, right? I could even do that to the D string, right? And all this stuff is also done on the C chord because those go together, right? Those are cousins, kind of, right? How many times have we heard something like that? Oh, okay, so that's called C sus, if you don't know, what I'm doing with my pinky down. Will that work on A minor? Oh, that does. That's cool, right? So this is kind of the process of thinking I'm trying to show here, right? Is that there's a lot of connection here, and if you have some kind of framework a little bit, in my opinion, that only framework needed is, this is the key, use numbers, think in numbers. Your brain will take care of the rest, right? Because these numbers are consistent sounding in every key. So if you can have these little ideas of, oh, this is a 6, and I know some movements I can do, or maybe it's sliding up this chord. It's kind of cool, right? 2 frets, free. That's a free sound, A minor. Well, that sounds cool. I can hear a lot of songs there, right? And you can take that up more if you know some different shapes. But sometimes moving around a chord or taking a finger off a string or on. I had a friend of mine who was another teacher at a school I worked at, and he said this was essentially his guitar education, was just curiosity. What happens if I move this up 1 fret? That's really dissonant. What happens if I take away 2 fingers and leave 1 on? Well, that's cool. I think if you do that on capo 4, that's like Jolene by Dolly Parton. Something like that, or there's some kind of movement like that. What happens if I take one of the notes up? Oh, beautiful, right? What happens if I take maybe the top 2 notes up? Right, and now we're getting into more advanced things. But that kind of thinking is really cool, to have that curiosity. And when you're playing songs, you can exercise these things, and your ear and your subconscious will kind of be the ones learning if we are really flexible in our kind of conscious attention on this stuff. We don't want to be like, what chord is this? I mean, that's okay, that's a valid question to ask, but it's kind of missing the whole point, right? So, okay, to review real quick, A minor, typical, I use a lot. I typically find myself using the second one, A minor 7, just a C chord with no ring. A minor 7 plus pinky, get that beautiful, the 7's now on top, that's kind of cool. And then finally, this usually will go with other chords as kind of a focal point for these chord progression. And then finally, A minor plus movement, where we're moving around stuff in the chord. Experiment, right? Slide up, take stuff off. You might quickly find a tune in there, right? Okay, so moving on to the next most common chord here would probably be the 2 chord, and I'm talking in kind of general popular music, not in the key of C, just generally if let's say I'm at a karaoke night at somewhere and they're singing all these songs, and I'm enjoying my food, and of course 90% of my brain, well, hopefully it's less than that, 10% of my brain is just like listening to the music and being like, that's that chord, that's that chord. I can't help it, I just can't turn it off now. Now I'm more kind of feeling the chords. It's kind of like almost as if someone's just showing me colors in the background, and I'm like, oh, that's purple, that's orange, or whatever. Or that's, oh, that's this TV show, or that's a football game. I'm not really that conscious of it, but I can tune into it more. That being said, the 2 chord is the most next common probably. So 1, 4, 5, and 6 are like the GOAT. Like those 4 chords go together so deeply much. Many pop artists don't even venture outside of that for any other sounds, which is okay. Some do. You will eventually hear some other sounds. And 2 and 3 are going to be, I would say 2 is the most next common, then 3, and then chords outside of the key. Again, I'll talk more about this in the future. So the 2 chord, the D minor in this case, I really like a normal D minor chord. Sounds great. A lot of guitarists do movement on this chord, right? With the open, you can do a lot of pretty stuff. Moving around that top note, just like a D major, right? Real similar, right? This next chord, D minor 7, you know, kind of in line with A minor 7. I don't play this a ton, but I wanted to show it to you because this is the idea of keeping the C in there, right? From the 1 chord. So if I keep that there, the only issue I have with this chord, it sounds actually really nice. Right? But it's kind of awkward to play, and we're getting into the F problem because F and D minor go together, right? This is kind of from an F chord, like this little 2-string bar on the 1st fret. And I'm not a huge fan of that for many guitarists, including myself. Just it's a little bit of pressure. The 1st fret is especially kind of pressure oriented, or you know, a little harder to fret there. If you play electric, that might be pretty easy to play. But that's a really nice sound. You could even use 3 fingers, right? And even getting into different fingerings as a guitarist and being flexible with that is actually, I would say, a sign that you are growing and progressing as a guitarist, to be flexible. Really flexible fingerings we can handle it, right? Just like I'm sure a seasoned pilot could be flexible if you like moved around some of the stuff in the cockpit a little bit. They could still make it work, but they would have to be maybe more mindful in certain ways. So I would mess with this. It's nice, it's really nice, but I don't play it a ton. That being said, I really like it. And if a song was just like 1 to 2, like C to D minor, there's not a great way to make that movement really smooth, where as in the key of another, maybe played in another key or capoed, it might be a little easier to get from 1 to 2 with like D and E minor, or G and A minor, or something like that. So, okay, the next one right here, D minor plus index and pinky. So this one is right in line with this, right? So if I include my pinky with a D minor, and now I can add this G from the C chord, right? This would be the 4 in a D minor. If you're kind of newer to chord voicings or chord terminology, this is the 4th note. If D is 1 temporarily at the chord level, 4, 3, 2, 1, right? And then why not add the 1, the C, right? So technically this chord is like a D minor 11, but with no 3rd, right? Almost useless to say that. Yeah. So if you are kind of have drowned in music theory in the past, like I have, and you have been missing clarity and application, I would recommend to just like shed a lot of those ideas. They serve a point, right? But you have to really be mindful of them. And I would think more like, I want to try this, and maybe I'm going to let my ear and maybe an understanding of numbers. And I say understanding, like really the emotional part of numbers, where I'm like, okay, I need something here that sounds like a 2, something, right? I got to get something that sounds like this 2 chord. So that to me sounds enough like it. Like just as an example, a song that quickly comes to mind that's just 1 and 2 is Tennessee Whiskey by Stapleton. I listen to so many kinds of music, so I'll pull from many genres of music, and I've taught a lot as well of these different things that I don't tend to listen to sometimes. But so if I was going 1, you can kind of, oh, there it is. I'm trying to play the lead. I had to go to that D minor 7. But right, that 1, and then you go into 2, and I could go to another one. You know, that's the nice thing about these is they're all interchangeable. I could do that little movement, that's really nice. What if that sounds a little funky, but I was gonna say, what if I move the D minor 7 up like before on the A minor? So get creative here. You're gonna find things that sound really, really nice, and you're trying to find the easiest thing to implement into your kind of vocabulary on the guitar. Be realistic here. So, you know, the more you play it, the easier it gets. And if you really dig the sound and it's comfortable, I would, you know, try to include it as much as you can. Okay, so finally, D minor 9. So this one is basically, we're moving up the neck a little bit. We're gonna take this like a D shape, right? They're not in the key of C anymore, but 3 frets up to 5th and 6th fret. And this is a D minor actually, because if you move D up 3 frets, you get F. Right, D, E flat, D sharp, E, and then E and F, there's nothing between them, right? So now, that sounds like this. And F and D minor are the same thing, right? 4 and 2. So now, this is not actually the voicing. I had to include this voicing because I love it. It's this, but take off your middle finger. So open thinnest. Not pretty? So we have this little clash here. And this is a very, very similar voicing, actually almost identical to this A minor 9 that I taught in the key of G, I believe, in that video. So check that out. I think that's part 2 of the key of G, where I do 2, 3, and 6 of G. And this, you know, the B's in the key of G, right? So that's kind of the rationale there. And in here, the E is a part of the key of C, or a C chord. And that's really pretty. So this is leaving the open position, but that could be a really nice sound. Going back to Tennessee Whiskey. Da, da, dun, da, da. It's a little clashy. That might not be the right vibe for that song. But really pretty chord voicing nonetheless. And pretty easy to play, right? 2 fingers. Doesn't get much easier than that. It's just a little out of the way a little bit, if we will. Okay, so to review D minor real quick, we have our typical one. I use this a lot. I feel like this one gets used quite a lot by people. I hear it a lot. D minor 7, maybe a little bit, but the 1st fret might make that a little harder. If you're up the neck and capoed, that might be a lot easier. D minor with the index and pinky down. This is like a chord like someone like James Taylor loves. Has a lot of beautiful color to it, right? And it's a little, holding its cards a little bit. It's not like, I'm a D minor. It's more like, ooh, this is cool. Kind of a sus sound, right? No 3rd in there. And finally, we have D minor 9. This is 5 and 6. Right? Okay, finally, E minor. Try not to make this too long, but I think these are valuable, so that's why I'm here. So, okay, E minor, the typical, of course. We have our typical, this sounds great. In the key of C, this would sound like, is it, what's that, is it Space Oddity? I should know. I should really know. But the Bowie tune is, right, 1 to 3. That's beautiful, right? If that's the vibe, it's just a plain old C chord and a plain old E minor. That's great. There's really nice, really, really beautiful voice leading, meaning hardly anything moves, right? And at the beginning of this series, I almost drew the 3 chord as like a brownish, whatever color that the 5 is also, but also a bluish, like a blue as well, because it's very similar to 1. Right, and that's kind of how these work, is like every other chord, because of how chords are built, they have a lot of similarity. So look out for that in songs, whatever key you're in a song. Once you know some of this language and this understanding, you'll often see a lot of beautiful voice leading from 1 to 3. Okay, so the next one, if we take the same idea from A minor 7, a lot of these ideas of keeping something from the 1 chord in there, we could just keep our first finger down and add a C to this chord. So this is a little dissonant, but I really like the sound, right? And then this sound. Isn't that cool? It's a little dissonant because we have that interval in there. This is like called the minor 9th. But it works. I'll buy it. Because the C and E on top is just beautiful, right? It's a really nice kind of cool long form thing happening. Okay, and also I plus please. So this is just like the same thing we did, right? These are all kind of similar. So we could go like this. Very similar, but also cool. You could also use any E minor 7 or any E minor. That sounds nice too. I probably wouldn't play this in the key of C unless maybe I have my pinky already down. Something like that, right? So there's good applications, and you just need to experiment here. That E minor is really nice. Maybe when we want the E open for everything. Right, something like that. I dig that sound too. Okay, and finally we have C over E. So this chord, I put this on here. It's not technically an E minor, even though some of the E minors we've already played are pretty much this chord. Remember, like when you know piano more, this can make more left brain sense. But C, E, G, right, C chord, E, G, B is E minor. So C major 7, for instance, has an E minor in it, right? So the reason I put this here though is that usually when you hear 3 in the bass, if I'm hearing a song that's like going like, let's say I just hear the bass line and it's going like, right, something like that. So usually when I hear that note in the bass, which you can almost make a chord chart from a song with just the bass part, that's it. 99% of the time that's the case. Sometimes there'll be ambiguity, but usually you can kind of figure out, because this is kind of like a play or like a common thing happening, and usually the same kind of story is told. It's not like, we're usually not playing a minor 4 all the time and a major 3 and a major 6. Some songs of course do that. So there is more movements that the other instruments fill out. But all being said, the 3 in the bass, not E, but E in this case, but 3 in the bass typically is a 1 over 3. That's usually how it gets harmonized. Meaning it's usually not this, that very kind of distinct sound, that sound, right? It's usually like this. Right? A good example of a pop song that does this, Free Fallin', right? So that song kind of does, well, maybe that's John Mayer's version. I've heard a few people play it like that, but they go like, they kind of play the C or the 1 in an inversion which goes to the F, right? Or so many songs do this, right? What's some other ones that do this? I need to find some other examples in my head, quickly accessible. But lots of songs do this where, like Castle on the Hill, that Ed Sheeran song, I just taught it recently. And that one goes, right? And it's in the key of D, but 1, 3, 4. So that's often what happens, right? We're moving to the 4. And actually, this is a similar thing I think I mentioned in the part 1 of this video with the G chord. When you hear 7 in the bass, like in this key, B, typically, I say typically, the vast majority of the time, it would never be diminished chord, which is actually the normal 7, right? The normal 7 is a diminished. You're just not going to hear that though. What you will hear is that this note will be harmonized as a 5 chord with a 7 in the bass, right? So you're not going to hear like, and then a diminished chord. You're going to hear like 1, so 5 over 7 to 6 to 1 over 3, right? And you can call that 1 over 3. You could call it PB and J. It doesn't matter. It really just doesn't matter. Once you kind of realize that I'm not really, the rules don't matter as much, or the names, as the feeling and like the ability to hear it, right? So if you can hear it, that's what we want, right? There's a lot of that kind of inversion stuff with the 3 and the 7, because 3 goes to 4, half step, and 7 goes to 1, right? So that's how the scale, the steps are. So those are half steps that really want to go there. And that works to our advantage, and that's usually how these get harmonized. So this is a really nice voicing here though, because C over E, it's easy to play. The thickest is already there, the E is ready to go. All right, and that will usually go to F. So, and if you can play the F in the bass, that's best, but if not, you could do that. And you know, when you're in a band or you're playing guitar, you don't have to play the E part at all. You could just play a C chord, because if you're, if there's a bass player underneath you, they can play the E, right? But if you are looking to have more, qualitative, colorful, flexible chords, that is a great thing to know how to do. Is to be able to play that 1 over 3 in whatever key you're in. If I'm like here, another Ed Sheeran song randomly that does this, Thinking Out Loud. Remember that one? Right. So 1, 3, just 1 over 3, right? It's not F sharp minor. That's a certain kind of, a little bit more melancholy, dramatic change to me, right? And 1 to 1 over 3 is more about the bass. Right, so some songs or some keys that's easier to hit than others. And that's why I'm here, is to help you kind of find some of these sounds, and that way you can implement them. I've been going long enough. I'm gonna go and wrap it up. But if this has been helpful, please comment, like this video. If you like what I'm doing here, I'm gonna do a lot more of it. That's the plan. I will be back with maybe 1 or 2 more of these series in different keys, probably the key of D and key of E. There's one more key, the key of A, that I like to play in. Those 5 keys total, which are like the caged keys, are really where it's at with good chord voicings that are resonant on guitar. And I think unlocking each key at a time, and what serves you, what kind of, whatever music you're into, it's going to be different things. You're going to find your own kind of cool voicings that you can use. There might be less use cases for them, or more. Maybe, some of these you'll just play all the time, and they really are your kind of vibe that you prefer. So let me know in the comments if there's a cool voicing you like to play for any of these chords, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.